The heavy wooden door of the Iron Hawks clubhouse creaked as I pushed it open that November night. Cold wind followed me inside, carrying the scent of snow and my own fear. The warmth hit my face immediately, a mix of cigarette smoke, beer, and something that smelled like my grandma's kitchen when she made Sunday dinner. 7 men looked up from their card game, bottles of Budweiser frozen halfway to their lips. The jukebox in the corner was playing that old song about a midnight train, but it might as well have been silent for how quiet everything got. My pink backpack felt heavy on my shoulders, heavier than it should have been for just carrying my stuffed rabbit and some crackers I'd grabbed from home. "Daddy made Mommy go to heaven," I whispered, because that's what grown-ups always said when someone died, even though I knew better. The biggest man at the table, the one with gray hair and arms covered in tattoos, slowly set down his cards. His eyes were the same color as the storm clouds outside, and they looked at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle. The other men shifted in their chairs, leather creaking, boots scraping against the wooden floor. "Jesus Christ," someone muttered from the back of the room. "Language," the gray-haired man said without taking his eyes off me. "There's a kid here." I took another step inside, letting the door swing shut behind me. My sneakers squeaked against the floor, and I could feel all their eyes on me like spotlights. These weren't the kind of men Mommy usually talked to at the grocery store or at church. These were the kind of men she told me to stay away from, with their leather vests and rough voices and hands that looked like they'd seen too many fights. But Mommy had also told me something else, something she'd whispered in my ear just 3 nights ago when she tucked me into bed. "Family means the people who keep you safe, sweetheart. Remember that." And right now, I didn't feel safe anywhere else in the world. 3 nights earlier, Mommy had been moving around our kitchen like she was dancing to music. Only she could hear. Except her face was all purple and swollen on one side. She kept touching her ribs like they hurt, wincing every time she reached for something in the cupboards. "Sweetheart, come here for a minute," she called, her voice softer than usual, like she was trying not to let it break. I climbed down from my chair at the breakfast table, leaving my cereal to get soggy. Mommy was kneeling by my pink backpack, the one with the glittery unicorn patch she'd sewn on last month. Her fingers were shaking as she unzipped the small pocket in front. "I need you to keep something safe for me," she said, pulling out a small black rectangle that looked like the recording thing she used at work to remember patient notes. "This is very important, baby. If anything ever happens to me, if I can't be here to take care of you anymore, I need you to make sure someone you trust hears what's on here." She slid the recorder deep into the pocket, then added a small silver stick that looked like the thing Daddy plugged into his computer. "These will protect you, Naomi. They'll tell people the truth about what really happened." "What truth, Mommy?" I asked. But she just kissed my forehead and zipped up the backpack. "Family means the people who keep you safe," she whispered against my hair. "Remember that. Not the people who are supposed to keep you safe, but the people who actually do it. You'll know the difference when the time comes." I wanted to ask her why she was crying, why her hands were shaking, why Daddy had been yelling so loud the night before that Mrs. Patterson from next door had knocked on our door to check if everything was okay. But something in her eyes told me not to ask those questions yet. "I love you more than all the stars in the sky," she said, just like she did every night. But this time, it sounded like goodbye. The Iron Hawks clubhouse used to be Mickey's Roadhouse, back when truckers still stopped here on their way to Chicago. Now it was home to 7 men who'd all served their country and come back to find that their country didn't quite know what to do with them anymore. Grant Miller sat at the head of the scarred wooden table, his graying hair pulled back in a ponytail, dog tags catching the light from the Budweiser sign above the bar. At 52, he carried himself like a soldier, even in civilian clothes, but his eyes held the kind of weariness that came from seeing too much and sleeping too little. Cole Jenkins shuffled the deck of cards with practiced efficiency, his trucker's cap pulled low over eyes that had seen too many miles of empty highway. He'd lost his CDL after one too many fights with dispatchers, who didn't understand that some loads weren't worth hauling, some routes weren't worth taking. Doc Harris wiped his hands on a greasy rag, motor oil staining his fingernails black. He'd been an army medic in Afghanistan, but now he fixed Harleys and pickup trucks, finding peace in engines that made sense, unlike the broken bodies he'd tried to patch together overseas. Ray Thompson sat in the corner, nursing his third beer and reading a paperback Western novel with a faded cover. Divorced 3 years now, he'd joined the Hawks, because they were the only family that didn't ask questions about why. He slept on their couch more often than in his own apartment. The other three, Murphy, Stevens, and young Jake, who wasn't really young anymore at 35, completed their circle. They'd all found each other through shared stories of VA hospitals that ran out of appointments, job interviews that ended when employers saw their addresses, and families who loved them, but didn't quite know how to live with the ghosts they'd brought home. They were good men who'd made bad choices, or maybe just men who'd been abandoned by a world that thanked them for their service, but forgot to mention what that service would cost. And now, a 7-year-old girl was standing in their doorway, asking them to be something they'd never learned how to be. "What's your name, kiddo?" Grant asked, his voice gentler than I'd expected from someone so big. "Naomi Carter," I said, shifting my backpack to my other shoulder. "I live on Maple Street." "Well, I used to live on Maple Street." "Where's your mommy now, Naomi?" I bit my lip, tasting salt. "She's in heaven. Daddy said the angels came to get her. But I know that's not true, because angels don't make people bleed that much." The men exchanged glances across the table. Doc Harris set down his beer and stood up, moving toward me with the careful steps of someone who'd spent years approaching wounded things. "Honey, when did this happen?" "3 days ago. I've been hiding in Mrs. Patterson's garden shed, but she doesn't know. I ate crackers and drank water from her hose when she wasn't looking." Cole cursed under his breath, earning a sharp look from Grant. "How did you know to come here?" Doc asked, crouching down so we were eye to eye. "Mommy said family means people who keep you safe. She said when I needed help, I should look for people who understood what it meant to fight for something important." I pointed to the American flag hanging above the bar, then to the Marine Corps emblem on Murphy's leather vest. "She said soldiers know about protecting people." "Your mommy sounds like a smart lady," Doc said. "She was a nurse. She took care of sick people at the hospital, and she took care of me, and she tried to take care of Daddy too, but he didn't want to get better." Ray looked up from his book, his face tight with an expression I didn't understand yet, but would learn to recognize as barely controlled anger. "Kid," he said slowly, "where exactly is your daddy right now?" Before I could answer, headlights swept across the windows, bright and fast and wrong. Car doors slammed in the parking lot, and I heard a voice that made my whole body go cold. "Naomi, I know you're in there. Get out here right now." Daddy's voice carried through the walls like thunder, and suddenly all the warmth drained out of the room. The bikers were on their feet in seconds, chairs scraping back, hands reaching for things I couldn't see in the dim light. "That's him," I whispered, backing toward the far corner. "That's my daddy." Grant moved to the window, pushing aside a faded curtain. 3 men, 2 cars. One of them's got something in his hand. "Gun?" Murphy asked. "Can't tell. Could be." "Naomi!" Daddy's voice was closer now, right outside the door. "I'm not playing games. You've got something that belongs to me and I want it back." My hands clutched the straps of my backpack. Inside, I could feel the weight of Mommy's secrets. The little recorder and USB stick that she'd said would protect me. But they felt more like targets now, like things that made me dangerous to be around. "Should we call the cops?" Jake asked, pulling out his cell phone. "And tell them what?" Ray snorted. "That we've got somebody else's kid and her father wants her back?" "He killed my mommy," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The room went quiet, except for the sound of boots on gravel outside. "He thinks nobody knows, but I heard them fighting. She said she was going to tell people about the bad things he did with money, and he said she better keep her mouth shut or she'd be sorry." "Jesus," Cole breathed. The next morning she was dead, and Daddy told everyone she fell down the stairs. But stairs don't make handprint bruises on your neck. Doc's face went white. Grant stepped away from the window, his jaw tight. The front door rattled as someone tested the handle. "You've got 10 seconds to open this door, or we're coming in anyway," Daddy shouted. "Naomi's got something that doesn't belong to her, and I'm not leaving without it." "What do we do?" Stevens asked. Grant looked at me, then at his brothers, then back at me. "We decide what kind of men we want to be." "Everyone step back from the girl," Grant said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd given orders under fire. "Form up behind me." The bikers moved without question, creating a wall of leather and muscle between me and the door. I could hear my daddy and his friends talking outside, their voices getting angrier, more urgent. "This is insane," Jake muttered. "We don't even know what we're getting into." "We know enough," Doc said. "Kid's got bruises on her arms. Fresh ones." I looked down at my wrists where Daddy had grabbed me 3 days ago when I tried to run to Mommy. The purple marks were fading to yellow now, but they still hurt when I moved wrong. Look, I feel bad for the kid, Cole said, but we can't just decide to fight her father. Courts don't work that way. We're not her legal guardians. Courts don't work for dead women either, Ray said quietly. The door rattled again, harder this time. Naomi! Daddy's voice was right against the wood now. I'm counting to 5, and then we're coming in. 1. My heart hammered against my ribs. Please don't let him take me, I whispered to Grant. Please. He'll hurt me too. 2. Grant looked down at me, and I saw something change in his face. Something that reminded me of how Mommy looked when she used to check on me in the middle of the night, making sure I was breathing, making sure I was safe. 3. Murphy, call 911, Grant said. Tell them we've got a domestic situation and request immediate response. 4. The rest of you, nobody draws anything, nobody escalates. We protect the kid, but we do this clean. 5. The door exploded inward, but Grant was already moving, positioning himself directly in front of me as Daddy and 2 other men burst into the clubhouse. Daddy's face was red with rage, his eyes wild and desperate. The men behind him looked like the kind of people Mommy had warned me about, the kind who smiled with their mouths, but not their eyes. There she is, Daddy snarled, pointing at me. Give me my daughter and that backpack, and nobody has to get hurt. Nobody's getting hurt anyway, Grant said calmly. Police are on their way. I don't think so, one of Daddy's friends said, pulling back his jacket to show the gun tucked in his waistband. I think you're going to hand over the kid and mind your own business. That's when I knew for certain that Mommy had been right about everything. The standoff lasted exactly 4 minutes, though it felt like hours. Daddy kept shouting demands while his friends shifted nervously, hands hovering near weapons. The bikers stood their ground, forming an unbreakable circle around me. Then sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Shit! One of Daddy's men hissed. Victor, we need to go. Not without that backpack, Daddy snarled. But his eyes were already calculating escape routes. Police are 30 seconds out, Grant said. You want to be here when they arrive? Daddy stared at me with pure hatred. This isn't over, Naomi. That bag has my property in it, and I'm going to get it back. Count on it. They ran, leaving the clubhouse door hanging open and cold air rushing in. I started shaking then, really shaking, like all the fear I'd been holding back for 3 days finally caught up with me. Grant knelt down and gently took my shoulders. You're safe now, kiddo. They're gone. 2 police cars pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing red and blue across the walls. Officer Martinez, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, took my statement while her partner arrested Daddy and his friends a mile down the road. We'll hold them for 48 hours, she told Grant. But unless the girl has evidence of actual abuse, family court's going to side with the biological parent. She says he killed her mother, Doc said. She's 7 years old. Kids say lots of things when they're scared and traumatized. Officer Martinez looked at me sadly. I believe something bad happened to her mom. But we need proof. Real proof. After the police left, I sat on the old couch in the corner while the bikers cleaned up broken glass from the door. My backpack was still on my shoulders, and I could feel Mommy's secrets waiting inside like sleeping dragons. Can I stay here tonight? I asked Grant. I don't want to go back to the garden shed. He looked at the other men, then back at me. Yeah, kiddo. You can stay. We'll figure out tomorrow when tomorrow comes. That night, Doc gave me a blanket that smelled like motor oil and kindness, and I fell asleep on the couch, listening to the bikers play poker and argue about baseball. For the first time in 3 days, I felt safe enough to close my eyes. Living with 7 bikers was nothing like I'd expected. They made breakfast every morning. Real breakfast with eggs and bacon and toast, not the cereal and Pop-Tarts I usually ate at home. Grant cooked like he was feeding an army, which I guess he was. Eat up, little warrior, he'd say, sliding another pancake onto my plate. Growing girls need fuel. Cole taught me how to ride the pink bicycle they'd bought at a garage sale, running alongside me in the parking lot until I stopped wobbling. Balance is everything, he told me, steadying the handlebars when I started to tip. In riding, in life, in everything that matters, Doc showed me how engines worked, letting me hand him tools while he fixed motorcycles. His hands were gentle despite being stained with grease, and he explained everything in words I could understand. See this spark plug? It's like the heart of the engine. Everything else can be perfect, but if the heart's not working, nothing runs right. Ray read me bedtime stories from a collection of fairy tales someone had donated to the clubhouse library, but he changed all the endings, making them less scary, more hopeful. In his version, Red Riding Hood's grandmother was just napping, and the wolf became her friend after she offered to share her cookies. Murphy and Stevens took turns walking me to school each morning, making sure I had lunch money and that my homework was done. The other kids stared at first. Their daddies didn't wear leather vests or have tattoos covering their arms. But they stopped staring when they realized my new family came to every school play and science fair, cheering louder than anyone else. Jake, who wasn't much older than the high school boys, helped me with math homework at the kitchen table while the others played cards. He was patient when I didn't understand fractions, drawing pictures of pizza slices until the numbers made sense. For 2 weeks, it felt like I'd found my place in the world. The clubhouse became home in a way our house on Maple Street never had. There was laughter here, and safety, and men who kept their promises. I should have known it couldn't last. Thanksgiving morning arrived gray and cold, with snow starting to dust the parking lot. Grant had been up since dawn, preparing a feast that would have fed twice as many people as we had. The smell of roasting turkey filled the clubhouse, mixing with the scents of stuffing and pumpkin pie. I'd made handprint turkey decorations out of construction paper, tracing around my fingers with different colored crayons. Each turkey had a name written on its body: Grant Turkey, Doc Turkey, Cole Turkey, and so on. I'd even made one for Mommy, though I wasn't sure if people in heaven celebrated Thanksgiving. "This is the best Thanksgiving ever," I announced, standing on a chair to tape my turkeys to the wall above the bar. "Better than last year?" Ray asked, helping me reach a high spot. Last year, Mommy and I ate frozen dinners, because Daddy was too busy with his work friends to come home. We watched the parade on TV and pretended we weren't sad. The room got quiet the way it always did when I mentioned my parents. The bikers were good at pretending my old life hadn't happened, but sometimes the truth slipped out and reminded everyone that I wasn't really supposed to be here. Grant was carving the turkey when we heard a car door slam outside. Through the window, I could see a white sedan with government plates, and my stomach dropped. "Social services," Murphy said grimly. The woman who walked through our repaired front door looked tired and overworked, carrying a briefcase and wearing the kind of expression that said she'd seen too many bad situations to be surprised by anything anymore. "I'm Linda Brooks from Children and Family Services," she announced, showing her badge. "I'm here about Naomi Carter." I slid off my chair and moved closer to Grant, who instinctively put his arm around my shoulders. "The child cannot remain in this environment, Ms." Brooks continued, pulling out a folder. "None of you have legal guardianship, and several of you have criminal records that make you unsuitable caregivers." "What kind of criminal records?" Grant asked quietly. "Bar fights, drunk and disorderly, 1 count of assault from 2019. Nothing that would normally concern us, but we're talking about placing a child with unmarried men who live in what is essentially a clubhouse." "This is my family!" I shouted, surprising myself with how loud my voice was. "They take care of me. They love me." "Ms." Brooks looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. "Honey, I know you care about these men, but family court has rules. Your father is your legal guardian, and when he's released from jail, you'll need to go home with him." "He killed my mommy." "Sweetheart, your mother died in an accident. It's very sad, but accidents happen." "It wasn't an accident." I was crying now, angry tears that made everything blurry. "I heard them fighting. I know what really happened." "But Ms." Brooks was already putting papers back in her briefcase, already making decisions that would tear apart the only safe place I'd ever known. The turkey was getting cold on the table, but nobody was hungry anymore. Daddy got out of jail 3 days later. The charges were dropped because, as Officer Martinez explained to Grant over the phone, threatening behavior and disturbing the peace are misdemeanors, and his lawyer convinced the judge that he was just a grieving father trying to get his daughter back. I watched from the clubhouse window as his black car cruised slowly past. Twice in the afternoon, once just after dark. He didn't stop, didn't get out, just drove by like a shark circling its prey. "He's planning something," Cole said, closing the curtains tighter. "Let him plan," Grant replied. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept checking the locks on the doors and windows. That night, I woke up screaming from a nightmare where Daddy's hands were around Mommy's throat again, squeezing until her eyes went wide and then empty. Grant was beside me in seconds, holding me while I shook and cried. It was just a dream, little warrior. Just a dream. But it wasn't, I whispered against his chest. It really happened. I saw it happen, and nobody believes me. I believe you, he said softly. We all believe you. The next morning, Ms. Brooks returned with more paperwork and a court order. Preliminary hearing is scheduled for next Tuesday. Mr. Carter has petitioned for immediate return of his daughter, and the judge is inclined to grant it unless there's evidence of abuse or neglect. Look at her, Doc said, gesturing to where I sat at the kitchen table, coloring in a book Murphy had bought me. Does she look abused or neglected to you? She looks well cared for, Ms. Brooks admitted. But that's not the legal standard we use. The law presumes that biological parents are the best caregivers unless proven otherwise. And what would constitute proof? Grant asked. Physical evidence of abuse, medical records, police reports, witness testimony from qualified adults. She looked at me sadly. Not the testimony of a traumatized 7-year-old who might be confused about what she saw. After she left, the clubhouse felt different. Smaller, like the walls were closing in, and we were all holding our breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. Daddy drove by twice more that day, slowing down each time, making sure we knew he was watching. We could run, Jake suggested that evening. Take her somewhere he can't find her. And then what? Ray asked. Live as fugitives? Hide forever? What kind of life is that for a kid? Better than the alternative, Murphy said darkly. But Grant shook his head. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. She deserves better than a life on the run. I went to sleep that night, knowing that Tuesday was coming, knowing that the people who loved me might not be able to protect me from the person who was supposed to love me most. The courtroom smelled like lemon cleaner and fear. I sat between Grant and Ms. Brooks at a table that was too big for me, my feet dangling inches from the floor. Across the aisle, Daddy sat with his lawyer, a man in an expensive suit who kept checking his Rolex and shuffling through papers. Judge Patricia Walters looked tired, like she'd spent too many years listening to stories about broken families and impossible choices. She reviewed the case file with the expression of someone who'd seen it all before and knew how it would end. Mr. Carter, she began, you're petitioning for the immediate return of your daughter, who has been in informal care with members of the Iron Hawks Motorcycle Club for approximately 3 weeks. Yes, Your Honor. My daughter ran away after her mother's tragic accident, and these men have been keeping her from me against my wishes. Daddy's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, my client is a grieving widower who simply wants his daughter back. While we appreciate that the defendants meant well, they have no legal right to retain custody of Mr. Carter's child. And Mr. Miller, the judge said, looking at Grant. You're requesting temporary guardianship based on what grounds? Grant's court-appointed lawyer, a young woman who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, cleared her throat. Your Honor, our witnesses will testify that the child has thrived in their care and has expressed fear of returning to her father. Fear based on what? The child believes her father was responsible for her mother's death. Daddy's lawyer objected immediately. Hearsay, Your Honor. The police investigation concluded that Mrs. Carter's death was accidental. There's no evidence to support these unfounded accusations. The judge looked at me directly for the first time. Naomi, do you understand why we're all here today? I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Can you tell me, in your own words, why you don't want to go home with your father? Because he killed my mommy, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. And if I go back with him, he'll kill me too. Naomi, the judge said gently. That's a very serious accusation. Do you have any proof of what you're saying? I looked at Grant, who nodded encouragingly. Then I looked at my backpack, sitting on the floor beside my chair, holding Mommy's secrets like a treasure chest I was afraid to open. Maybe, I whispered. But before I could say more, the judge was already making her decision. While I sympathize with everyone involved, the law is clear. In the absence of evidence of abuse or neglect, custody belongs with the biological parent. Mr. Carter, your daughter will be returned to you immediately. The gavel came down like thunder, and my world ended. They let me say goodbye, which was something, I guess. Grant knelt down in the courthouse hallway and pulled me into a hug that felt like it might be the last safe thing I'd ever feel. Listen to me, little warrior, he whispered in my ear. No matter what happens, you remember that you're loved. You remember that you're strong. And you remember that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us can't, but that doesn't mean nobody will. Don't let them take me, I begged, even though I knew it was too late. Please, Grant. Please don't let him hurt me. If you ever need us, you find a way to call. Day or night, you call and we'll come. Do you understand? I nodded against his shoulder, breathing in the smell of leather and motor oil that meant safety. Doc pressed something into my hand, a small silver whistle on a chain. Emergency signal, he said. Blow this as hard as you can, and every biker in 3 counties will hear it. Cole ruffled my hair one last time. You're tougher than you know, kid. Don't forget that. Ray wiped tears from his eyes that he pretended weren't there. Keep reading those fairy tales. Remember how they all end. Murphy and Stevens and Jake each hugged me, quick and fierce, like they were trying to transfer some of their strength into my small body. Then Ms. Brooks was taking my hand, leading me toward where Daddy waited by the courthouse doors. His face was all smiles for the social worker, but his eyes were cold and angry when they looked at me. Come on, sweetheart, he said in a voice like poisoned honey. Let's go home. The ride back to Maple Street was silent, except for the radio playing Christmas songs that felt obscene in their cheerfulness. Daddy's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white, and I could see the vein in his temple, throbbing the way it used to when Mommy asked too many questions about where he'd been. Our house looked smaller than I remembered, and darker. The neighbors had taken down their Halloween decorations and put up Christmas lights, but our house stayed dark. It looked like a place where happiness went to die. Get inside, Daddy said, not bothering with the fake sweetness now that Ms. Brooks wasn't watching. I climbed the front steps with legs that felt like they were made of lead, clutching my backpack against my chest. Behind me, I heard Daddy talking on his phone to someone, his voice low and urgent. Yeah, she's back. No, she didn't give them anything. But I need to be sure. The front door closed behind us, with a sound like a jail cell locking. Back at the clubhouse, the bikers sat in stunned silence around the poker table. Nobody touched the cards Cole had dealt an hour ago. Nobody opened the beers that were getting warm in their bottles. We should have fought harder, Jake said, staring at the floor. With what? Ray asked bitterly. Good intentions? Love? The system doesn't care about love. There has to be something we can do, Murphy insisted. Some kind of appeal, some legal loophole. Kid's gone, Stevens said flatly. Her bastard father has her back, and there's not a damn thing we can do about it. Grant hadn't spoken since they'd returned from the courthouse. He sat at the head of the table, still wearing the clean shirt and tie he'd put on for court, staring at nothing with eyes that looked like they'd seen too much loss for one lifetime. We failed her, he said finally. Just like we failed our brothers overseas. Just like we failed everyone who counted on us to be better than we are. That's not true, Doc started to say, but Grant cut him off. Isn't it? A 7-year-old girl asked us to keep her safe and we couldn't do it. What does that say about us? What does that say about everything we claim to stand for? The room fell quiet, except for the tick of the old clock above the bar and the distant sound of traffic on the highway. Outside, snow was starting to fall again, covering the world in white that looked clean but couldn't hide what lay underneath. That's when Grant noticed that my backpack was still there, forgotten in the chaos of goodbyes and legal defeat. It sat by the couch where I'd left it that morning, pink and cheerful and completely out of place in the somber room. She forgot her bag, he said, standing up. I'll drop it off tomorrow, Cole offered. But Grant was already walking over, already picking up the small pack that smelled like strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. He started to zip it closed, but something rattled inside. Something that didn't sound like toys or clothes or the kinds of things a 7-year-old usually carried. Grant opened the bag and reached inside, his fingers closing around a small rectangular object that felt like plastic and metal. When he pulled it out, everyone in the room leaned forward to see. It was a digital voice recorder, old and scratched, with a piece of masking tape stuck to one side. Written on the tape in careful handwriting were the words, "For Naomi, the truth." Grant's thumb found the play button and pressed it. The voice that filled the clubhouse was slurred with alcohol and thick with rage, but unmistakably Victor Carter's. I'm telling you, Marcus, the bitch has to go. She knows too much about the casino accounts, and she's threatening to go to the feds. Are you sure about this, Vic? Killing a nurse is going to bring heat. Make it look like an accident. Domestic violence gone wrong, maybe. Or a fall down the stairs. Karen's always been clumsy. The recording continued for another 10 minutes, detailing plans, discussing cleanup, arranging alibis. By the time it ended, every man in the room was on his feet. Jesus Christ, Cole whispered. Grant was already reaching for his phone, but Doc caught his arm. Wait. There might be more. There was more. Hidden in the same pocket was a USB drive labeled Insurance, in the same careful handwriting. Doc plugged it into his laptop, and spreadsheets filled the screen. Detailed records of illegal gambling operations, money laundering, tax evasion, and payoffs to local officials. Karen Carter was building a case, Doc said, scrolling through the files. She documented everything, and she gave it to her daughter to keep safe. Grant realized. That's why Victor wanted the backpack so badly. That's why he's been hunting her. Ray stood up so fast his chair fell over. We have to get her back. Right now. Tonight. No, Grant said, his voice steady and determined. We do this right this time. We take this evidence to Linda Brooks, to the police, to anyone who'll listen. We make sure it sticks. What if we're too late? Murphy asked. Grant looked at the voice recorder in his hand, then at the faces of his brothers around the table. Then we live with that. But we don't live with not trying. For the first time in hours, hope crept back into the room. At 6 a.m. the next morning, Grant stood outside Linda Brooks' house in his cleanest jeans and the button-down shirt. His ex-wife had bought him 3 Christmases ago. He'd been rehearsing what to say since 3 a.m., when he'd given up on sleep and spent the remaining dark hours listening to Karen Carter's recording over and over. Ms. Brooks answered her door in a bathrobe and slippers, coffee mug in hand, looking like a woman who'd been woken up too early by too many crises. Mr. Miller, what are you doing here? I have something you need to hear, Grant said, holding up the voice recorder. Something that changes everything. She listened to the entire recording sitting at her kitchen table, her face growing paler with each passing minute. When Victor's voice finally stopped talking about murder and money laundering, she was quiet for a long time. Where did you get this? It was in Naomi's backpack. Her mother hid it there before she died. This could be fabricated. Voice recordings can be faked. Grant plugged in the USB drive and showed her the spreadsheets on his phone. What about financial records? Bank transfers? Names and dates and amounts? Ms. Brooks studied the files, cross-referencing names with her own database of local officials and business owners. The more she read, the more her professional skepticism gave way to horrified understanding. My God, she whispered. Karen Carter was building a federal case. Money laundering, racketeering, tax evasion. This goes all the way to the mayor's office. And Victor Carter killed her to keep her quiet. We need to call the FBI and the state police. And we need to get Naomi somewhere safe right now. Grant was already reaching for his phone. I know just the place. By 8 a.m., federal agents were setting up a command center in the Iron Hawks clubhouse, while state police surrounded the house on Maple Street. By 9 a.m., Linda Brooks was in front of an emergency family court judge, presenting evidence that would make legal precedent. By 10 a.m., Victor Carter was in handcuffs, screaming about frame jobs and illegal searches, while his daughter watched from the back seat of a police car, clutching a silver whistle and refusing to cry where he could see her. Is it over? I asked Officer Martinez as we drove back toward the clubhouse. The dangerous part is over, sweetheart. Now comes the healing part. Through the car window, I could see Grant's motorcycle in the distance, leading a convoy of bikers down the highway toward home. They looked like knights in leather armor, and for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be rescued by people who actually meant it. The emergency custody hearing was held in the same courtroom where I'd lost everything just 2 days before. But this time, the gallery was packed with FBI agents, state police, and 7 bikers in their cleanest clothes, sitting in the front row like a wall of protective support. Judge Walters looked like a different person as she reviewed the evidence spread across her desk. Transcripts of the voice recording, printouts of financial documents, and a preliminary federal indictment that was already making headlines on the morning news. Mr. Carter, she said, looking at Daddy where he sat in his orange jailhouse jumpsuit, you are facing federal charges of racketeering, money laundering, tax evasion, and first-degree murder. In light of this evidence, All parental rights are hereby terminated pending the outcome of your criminal trial. Daddy's lawyer tried to object, but the judge held up her hand. Furthermore, given the extraordinary circumstances of this case and the demonstrated care provided by Mr. Miller and his associates, I am granting temporary custody to Grant Miller, with the understanding that formal adoption proceedings will begin immediately. The courtroom erupted in cheers from the biker section. I turned around to see Grant wiping tears from his eyes, Cole pumping his fist in the air, and Doc giving Murphy a hug that lifted the smaller man off his feet. Additionally, Judge Walters continued, I am ordering the establishment of a victims' compensation fund using assets seized from Mr. Carter's criminal enterprise. This fund will provide for Naomi's education, medical care, and any counseling she may need. Ms. Brooks leaned over and squeezed my hand. You did it, sweetheart. You and your mom, you did it. We all did it, I corrected, looking back at my new family. That's what families do. As the court session ended and people started filing out, I walked over to where Daddy sat with his lawyer and the federal marshals who would be taking him back to jail. He looked older somehow, smaller, like all the fight had gone out of him. I'm sorry your heart was so broken that you had to break other people to feel better, I told him. Mommy would have wanted me to forgive you, so I do. But I don't ever want to see you again. He stared at me with empty eyes, and for a moment I saw something that might have been regret. But then the marshals were leading him away, and I was running toward Grant, who caught me in a hug that felt like coming home. Ready to go home, little warrior? I'm already there, I said. 1 year later, the Iron Hawks clubhouse looked like a completely different place. The walls were still decorated with my construction paper turkeys from that first Thanksgiving, but now they were joined by finger paintings, school photos, and a banner that read, Little Warriors, Kids Helping Kids, in bright purple letters. The old bar had been converted into a snack station with juice, boxes, and granola bars, and the back room where the men used to play late-night poker was now a playroom filled with toys, books, and a small TV for cartoons. What had once been a refuge for broken men had become a sanctuary for broken children. We've got 3 more kids coming next week, Linda Brooks told Grant as she reviewed the paperwork for the nonprofit they'd established together. 2 brothers whose father was arrested for domestic violence, and a little girl whose mother overdosed. We'll make room, Grant said, watching me help 6-year-old Tommy with his homework at one of the new kid-sized tables. We always make room. The transformation hadn't been easy. There had been state inspections, background checks, training sessions, and more paperwork than anyone thought possible. 3 of the original bikers had moved on to apartments in town, unable to adjust to life with children underfoot. But the core group had stayed, trading beer for coffee, poker nights for bedtime stories, and the freedom of the road for the responsibility of being fathers to kids who needed them. Naomi's been accepted to the gifted program at Jefferson Elementary, Ms. Brooks continued. Her teacher says she's one of the brightest students she's ever had. I looked up from where I was helping Tommy sound out words in his reader. Is that good? That's very good, little warrior, Grant said, ruffling my hair. Your mom would be proud. I smiled and went back to the homework. Mommy was proud. I could feel it sometimes, like warm sunshine on my face when I was doing something that mattered. She was proud that her secrets had saved other kids besides me. Proud that her death hadn't been for nothing. Proud that love had won in the end. Grant, I said as Ms. Brooks packed up her files. Can we visit Mommy's grave tomorrow? I want to tell her about the new kids. Of course we can. We'll bring flowers. And maybe some of those cookies she liked? The ones with the chocolate chips? Those too. That night, I lay in my new bedroom. Really my own room, with pink walls and a unicorn bedspread, and glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Listening to the sounds of my family settling in for sleep, Doc was reading to the younger kids in the living room. Ray was helping Jake with his GED homework in the kitchen, and Cole was tuning his guitar for the lullabies he'd started playing every evening. Through my window, I could see Grant sitting on the front steps, smoking a cigarette and staring at the stars. Sometimes I still caught him doing that, looking up at the night sky like he was searching for answers to questions he couldn't ask out loud. I grabbed my backpack, the same pink one that had carried Mommy's secrets, now filled with crayons and homework and a digital camera Grant had given me for my 8th birthday, and tiptoed outside to join him. Can't sleep? He asked, stubbing out his cigarette. Just wanted to say thank you. For what? For being the kind of family Mommy told me to find. For keeping me safe. For showing me that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you can't, but other people will. Grant pulled me close, and we sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars and listening to the distant sound of children's laughter from inside our home. Family, it turned out, wasn't about blood or law or what was supposed to be. Family was about people who showed up when it mattered, who fought for you when you couldn't fight for yourself, and who never stopped believing that love could win, even when everything else failed. I was 8 years old, and I finally understood what my mother had been trying to teach me. The people who keep you safe, those are the ones who matter. Finale, victory final image.